Hello, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me, and thank you for being here. On behalf of the Tang Center for Silk Road Studies, I'm so glad you could join us as we approach the end of the semester. And it's hard to believe that we have only 2 events left, including today's. Next week, Thursday at 5 p.m., I just wanted to announce we will be welcoming Anissa Rahadiningpias for an in-person lecture titled Faith in the Unknown, Indian Ocean as an Exhibitionary Method. That talk will take place in 370 Dwinell. And for those who are unable to join in person, just to let you know that it will be recorded and shared via the Tang Center website. But today is really special because we have the joy and privilege of hearing from someone who really needs no introduction in our community, our dear friend and colleague, Osman Boperachi. And I say that not just because Osman's scholarly footprint is immense, though it truly is, but because he's become such an integral part of our intellectual and personal lives here. Introducing him or introducing you, Osman, feels a little bit like introducing a family member. Still, for the record, Osman is Emeritus Director of Research at the French Center for Scientific Research in Paris and was recently named a corresponding member of the prestigious Académie des Inscriptions et Belles-Lettres. His academic home is vast. As many of you know, he's a numismatist, an art historian, archaeologist, historian, a scholar of Buddhism. His affiliations are as wide-ranging as wide-ranging as his interests, including the Sorbonne, where he earned both his PhD and a higher doctorate, and of course UC Berkeley, where we have been fortunate to have him teach Buddhist art and archaeology, much to the delight and benefit of our students and faculty alike. Now, his publications span, and there are many, too many really to mention, and they span topics from Sri Lankan and Gandhāran art to Buddhism to ancient India, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and I'm going to spare you the full list only because it would take the better part of the afternoon. But do check out his website. It's a true treasure trove of all the activities and all the publications that he has produced. Now, Osman's work is rooted not only in archives, museums, and libraries, but in the field as well. And I've had the great pleasure of working alongside him on projects tracing the spread of Avalokiteśvara images in Sri Lanka and the maritime rods of the Indian Ocean. Now, today, Osman is going to bring us back to Gandhāra, another region that has long captured his interest and to which he has truly contributed some of his most important work. His lecture, The Origin and Evolution of Avalokiteśvara Images in the Light of New Discoveries from Gandhāra, promises to bring fresh insights to a subject that continues to resonate across regions, disciplines, and centuries. So I would now, if we were in person, ask our audience to please help me welcome you, Osman. But we can't clap for you, but we're so delighted to see you again and to have you here sharing your latest research. So welcome, Osman G.
Thank you so much, Sanjot. Thank you very much, Sanjot and Frank, for organizing this talk. It has always been a great pleasure for me to work with you, Sanjot, since the day I met you in 1980s, and we have been working on so many projects, especially the recent projects in Sri Lanka and also projects related to the Tang Center. So Sanjot Maindaly is the chair of the Tang Center for Silk Road Studies, and Frank Billet is the program director. So both of them really, invited me to give these talks. I'm very happy to do it now. I just want to see whether the PowerPoint works. So my today's talk is mainly based on what I have discovered during my recent visit, that was in March, to Pakistan, almost after 10 years. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Lillian Handlin, who took us there, and Professor Mohammed Hamid and his colleagues, and all my Pakistani friends, wherever they were, Lahore, Islamabad, Peshawar, Swat, and everywhere, for their unfailing collaboration and support. My today's talk revisits the question of the origin and evolution of the images of Bodhisattva Avalokiteśvara in the Gandhāra and their spread in India, China, along the trade routes. I hope to be able to discuss here the importance of hitherto unpublished or partially published sculptures whose iconography was misunderstood by our predecessors. We shall discuss in Gandhāran art, the iconography of the Bodhisattva Maitreya is often recognizable through his characteristic attribute, the flask, Pundika. On the contrary, identifying Avalokiteśvara in early Indian art forms is more of a challenge. Even some representations of Siddhartha Gautama as future Buddha have also led to confusion. Stone sculptures depicting the Gautama Buddha found in Gandhāra are amazingly numerous compared to the ones attested in their contemporary schools of Buddhist art in India. Many freestanding images of the Buddha is adorned by a halo and frequently depicted performing the Abhay Mudra with the raised right hand and holding the hem of the overrobe with the left hand. These sculptures are characterized by a neckline with two schemes of drapery resulting from the back throw of the thick overrobe. The semi-transparent nature of the Samgati discreetly reveals the gently rounded shoulders, the breasts, and the abdomen of the Buddha. Some sculptures are also characterized by Ganushnisha, which is a protuberance on the top of the skull, and Urna, tuft of hair between the eyebrows. Two among 22 signs that we call in Sanskrit Lakshana of a great Purusha or the great man, Mahapurusha. The hand making the Abhay Mudra of the colossal statue is webbed. It may be to demonstrate one of the 32 marks of a great being, or simply a technical device to keep the fingers together to avoid breaking. According to the Lakshana Sutta in the Digha Nikāya, the webbed fingers and toes are among the 32 marks peculiar to a great man. All the other signs, like feet with level tread, the soles with 1,000 spokes, projecting heels, long fingers and toes, legs like an antelope, etc., are not usually depicted in Gandhāran art. Although apart from the rock-cut reliefs which will be discussed later, no more large stone sculptures were made after the decline of the Kuṣāṇ Empire in Gandhāra and northwest India. However, the tradition of making standing Buddha images in bronze continued to exist. These images are datable to the 6th and the 7th centuries. The bronze statuette of the standing Buddha has a radiate halo and a mandorla behind him. Although the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in Gandhāran art usually depicted with only a halo, the Buddha Shakyamuni on some rare series of coins minted in the name of Kanishka I, whom we date between 127 to 150, is depicted standing, facing front, making a Abhay Mudra with the large right hand in front of a combined halo and mandorla. In this context, I wish to draw your attention to a pair of dies of King Kanishka I, which were used to strike coins depicting the Buddha. To my knowledge, the only coin die from Central Asia or from India known prior to this discovery is the one which we have already published of the Greco-Bactrian Demetrius I. The face of the die is engraved with a young, beardless Heracles standing frontally and crowning himself with his right hand. The left arm, over which hangs the lion's king, holds the club. The legend in Greek is engraved vertically on either side of the hero and reads as following: Basileus Demetrius. On the obverse die, which has not yet been found, should correspond to the silver tetradrachms of Demetrius I, who is wearing an elephant scalp, giving him the appearance of an Indian conqueror. The dice of Kanishka were found accidentally, which is very important, in a stupa deposit at Sajikideri, about 6 kilometers from Peshawar. According to the information I could gather, they were in a relic casket. The first images I received were of the unclean dice. A month later, the photographs of the clean dice were sent to me. The closest coin to the obverse die is a coin published by Katsumi Tanabe of the Hirayama collection. The King Kanishka stands clad in a heavy coat and long boots, with flames emanating from one of his shoulders, holding a scepter in his left hand and making an oblation over an altar with the right hand. Legend in Bactrian reads, Shānavo Shāvo Kanishko Kuṣāṇ. The engraving is almost the same on the coin, but the dies are not identical. The important element of the die is the positive image of the letter N, which has become a negative N on the coin after the strike. The reverse die depicts the Buddha standing, facing, making Abhe Mudra with his large right hand, while the left holds the hem of the Samgati worn over the Paridana. The combined halo and mandorella appear behind the Buddha. Legend in Bactrian reads, Buddha. Once again, the closest coin to the reverse die is the coin published by Katsumi Tanabe of the Hirayama collection. I would like to present an unpublished coin of Kanishka I, with the exceptional figuration of the Buddha on the reverse, which I could examine this time. It was found at a site close to Ring Road of Peshawar. When it was found, the coin in question was transformed into a pendant. The center part of the Buddha image can be seen through the opening in the mount. I also obtained the photographs of the coin after the pendant structure was removed. We have already published a medallion in the exhibition catalogue of Dolandri Saloxis with the gold coin of Kanishka set in the center. The pendant is composed of 8 petals, each adorned with a garnet bezel in the form of Picus religiosa leaf. Compared to all the coins of Kanishka depicting the Buddha, the one recently found in Peshawar is masterfully executed. The treatment of the facial features is closer to the earlier stone sculptures of the Buddha attested in Gandhāra. Like the beautiful sculpture in the Japanese collection, where the palm of the Buddha's right hand in Abhe Mudra is marked with a chakra symbol, the palm of the Buddha in our coin has the same characteristic. Although I do not wish to discuss further today, I firmly believe that the first anthropomorphic, in other words, human figure, Buddha with a human figure, of the Gautama Buddha were made in Gandhāra, but not in Mathura. In Gandharan art, the iconography of the bodhisattva Maitreya is recognizable thanks to his attribute par excellence, the flask, Kundika, which is translated by of my colleagues as the Kamandalu, but it's not a Kamandalu, it is a Kundika, because it is clear from the sacred text that in his last birth, he will be a Brahmin. In the Visuddhamagga, The Path of Purification, written by Buddhaghosa in the 5th century CE, it is said, I quote, "In the future, the Blessed One Maitreya will arise. His father will be a Brahmin, Subrahma. His mother will be a Brahmin, Brahmavati." Both in Theravada and Mahāyāna context, Bodhisattva Maitreya is the one who is striving for full enlightenment after Gautama Buddha. This is the reason why he is mentioned in early Buddhist texts as the Bodhisattva who will appear on earth in the future to achieve complete enlightenment and teach the pure Dharma. In the Lalita Vistara, when the Bodhisattva was to leave the Tusita to be born in the human realm, he reassures the gods saddened by his departure. I quote, "The Bodhisattva Maitreya will teach you Dhamma." He then placed, he here means the future Buddha Gautama, placed the diadem from his own head upon the head of the Bodhisattva Maitreya and said, "Noble being, after me, you will become the perfect and complete enlightened Buddha." Quotation ends. In the Pali tradition as well, the role of the Bodhisattva Mettaya, in Sanskrit Maitreya, is very well attested. For example, in Chakravarti Siyanada Sutta, the lion's roar of the turning of the wheel, in the Digha Nikaya, the Buddha says, I quote, "And in that time, of the people with an 80,000 year span, there will arise in the world a blessed Lord, an Arahat, fully enlightened Buddha named Mettaya, endowed with wisdom, and conduct a welfarer, knower of the worlds, incomparable trainer of men to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened and blessed just as I am now." Quotation ends. The number of Bodhisattva Maitreya images found in Gandhāra is far greater than those attested in Mathura and Amaravati and Nagarjunakonda. In Gandhāran art, the iconography of Maitreya is easily identifiable, not only thanks to the water flask held in his hand, but also by his hairstyle, consisting of the Brahminical knot, also known as bow knot or double-looped top knot. This hitherto unpublished sculpture, most likely from Saribalol, unambiguously depicts the ascetic nature of Maitreya in a meditative position, with the double-looped top knot and curls hanging down the sides and falling over the shoulders. The representation on the base of the sculpture is also that of a Maitreya holding the water flask to compensate for its absence on the main sculpture. The treatment of his hair in curls falling down the sides of his face reminds us of the sculpture of the same Bodhisattva attested by Saribalol and Tartibai excavations. The transition from Gautama Buddha to the Bodhisattva Maitreya, narrated in both Sanskrit and Pali text, is attested in many Gandharan sculptures. This fragment relief, belonging to the upper part of a false niche, is a good example to show this changeover. While the Bodhisattva Siddhartha is engaged in a philosophical conversation with an ascetic on our right, Maitreya on our left is depicted residing in the Tushita heaven, surrounded by Indra and Brahma and 6 more gods. In the same context is the beautiful Gandharan sculpture depicting Gautama Buddha seated cross-legged with his hands in the Dharni Mudra that is now in the National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh. On the pedestal, between the 2 extensions composed of the footprint of a lion, surrounded by a noble couple and 2 Buddhist monks all in Anjali Mudra, Gautama Buddha is depicted seated in the Dharni Mudra next to the Bodhisattva Maitreya. He holds a water flask in the left hand and makes the Abhaya Mudra with the right hand. He wears an uttariya draped around his left arm, leaving his right shoulder and most of his chest bare. Likewise, the base of a statue from Chotorak in Afghanistan, put in a chronological order, Bodhisattva Siddhartha, dressed in priestly garments, followed by Buddha Siddhartha Gautama, and finally the Bodhisattva Maitreya. The succession of the Bodhisattva Maitreya after the Buddha Shakyamuni is well symbolized here. The plant of the false gable panel depicting the Bodhisattva Siddhartha and then the teaching Buddha and 7 Buddhas with Maitreya is another good example to show that there is no confusion in the minds of Gandhāran artists about the transition of the Buddhahood from Gautama to Maitreya. The Bodhisattva Maitreya stands frontally, holding the ritual water flask, unfortunately partly broken, indicating he will be the next Buddha in the line, like the ones of the past depicted before him. Now, who are these Buddhas? John Marshall and Alfred Fouché correctly assume that the last 7 Manushya Buddhas or Buddhas of the past were depicted on some reliefs carved on the lintels of the Great Sanchi Stupa. However, their precise identification remains problematic because they are depicted with anachronic symbols like stupas and trees. It is interesting to recall that during the recent excavations at Kanagannahari stupa in Karnataka in South India, 6 sculptures in the round of the Buddha of the past and 2 of Gautama Buddhas were found. Each of them is identified thanks to an inscription engraved between the seat, figure, and the pedestal. You can see the 3rd statue were highlighted in yellow color. Now they are Vipassing with the legend Bhagavad Buddho Vipassi and Sikhin Bhagavad Sambuddho Singhi likewise. So we have Kapusanda and Konagama and Kashyapa. Among the Bodhisattvas, Maitreya is given a prominent place and he is named Aita or Ajita, the future Buddha. Ajita is another name for Maitreya, which occurs in Pali in the Anagata Vamsa, as argued by Oscar von Hinubbe. So the legend reads, Siddha Bhagava Bosatto Aito Anagato Buddho. Success, the Lord Bodhisattva Aita, Ajita, the future Buddha. Now we come to the question of Avalokiteshvara. While the identification of the Bodhisattva Maitreya in the context of Gandhāran art raises no problem, the dating and identification of the first images of Avalokiteshvara have been the subject of much debate. Contrary to the opinion of some modern scholars who claim that there is no epigraphic or textual evidence for the existence of a cult of Amitābha or Avalokiteshvara during the Kuṣāṇ period, the discovery of the Gandhārī manuscripts dated to the 1st century CE in a form similar to the Sanskrit version of the Aṣṭasāhasrikā Prajñāpāramitā, the main text of the Mahāyāna, reveals that Avalokiteshvara was known in Gandhāra. The first mention of Avalokiteshvara occurs in the Saddharmapuṇḍarīka Sutra, the Lotus of the Good Law or the True Doctrine Sutra, dated to the first 2 centuries before and after the Common Era. He becomes popular because of his healing powers and above all, his reputation as the protector of land and maritime traders mentioned in Saddharmapuṇḍarīka. The development of trade routes crossing Gandhāra valleys made this fertile land a meeting point of different cultures. The reputation of Avalokiteshvara as a savior of traders gained much popularity in Indian art, especially in Buddhist cave sculptures as well as in 5th century paintings of Western Deccan in Maharashtra, India. A group of sculptures, especially in the Buddhist caves of Kaneri, Ajanta, Ellora, and Aurangabad, depict the Aṣṭasāhasrikā Avalokiteśvara, story in which the bodhisattva comes to rescue human beings from the 8 great perils. The most evocative sculpture of the so-called litany of Avalokiteśvara, or Aṣṭamahābhaya, is the one carved on the left-hand side of the sanctum of the cave number 7 at Aurangabad. On this panel, Avalokiteśvara, with a lotus in the left hand and his right hand making the Abhaya Mudra, is shown protecting his devotees from the following dangers. So reading clockwise from the top right hand corner, enraged animals, you see a lion attacking a merchant, poisonous reptiles, you will see a cobra there, wild beast, that means a wild elephant, evil spirits and demons, shipwreck, captivity and slavery, sword of the enemy, and finally from devouring fire. This popularity led to the depiction of the 11-faced Avalokiteśvara, Ekadashamukha Avalokiteśvara, first attested in Kaneri, cave number 41, dated to the 6th century. Compared to these iconographies, which were diffused to Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, China, and Japan, early Gandharan sculptures were relatively simple. The confused ways of depicting this bodhisattva, who embodied the compassion of all the Buddhas, is due to the transitional period before the codification of the iconography prevailing in Gandhāra for 2-3 centuries, namely from the 2nd to 4th centuries of the Common Era. Sculptures depicting the triadic composition of the Buddha flanked by 2 bodhisattvas is a popular composition in Gandhāra. One of the flanking images is Maitreya, and the other is Avalokiteśvara, whose iconography goes through a number of stages to become identifiable as Padmapani Avalokiteśvara. Some reliefs depicting the triad, Buddha with Maitreya and Avalokiteśvara, from the excavations at Saribalor and Takhtibai, have been misunderstood by some art historians. In the catalogue of the Peshawar Museum by Ihsan Ali and Mohammad Naeem Qazi, these reliefs are referred to as the miracle of Sravasti. The Buddha seated on a lotus throne, performing Dhammacakra Mudra or preaching Mudra, is the first relief we have chosen from Saribalor. To the left of the Buddha stands a Bodhisattva Maitreya, recognizable by the water pot in his left hand and the loop in his hair, which reveal his Brahmin origins. To the right of the Buddha, or to our left, must be Avalokiteśvara, although his attribute is broken. The second relief, also found in Saribalor, misunderstood by our colleague, with a similar iconography, allows us to identify the Bodhisattva standing to the right of the Buddha. He is shown holding a garland of flowers, which is considered an attribute of Avalokiteśvara. In later codified iconography, he holds a lotus flower. In both sculptures, both bodhisattvas are depicted associated with 2 Hindu gods, Brahma to our left, holding the water pot, and Indra to our right, holding the thunderbolt or the Vajra. A skillful balance is achieved by depicting Avalokiteśvara together with Brahma and Maitreya together with Indra. The relief showing alternating Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, now in Taxila Museum, first published by Akira Miyaji, followed by Represents from left to right Maitreya as bodhisattva, then also as future Buddha. The next two are Siddhartha as bodhisattva and Buddha Shakyamuni. The final pair depicts the Avalokiteśvara in princely robe, holding a wreath, flanked by a Buddha, who will be the future Avalokiteśvara Buddha. The wreath is considered as an alternative to the lotus flower, the characteristic attribute of Avalokiteśvara in Indian and Chinese Buddhist art. If this hypothesis is correct, we have here the depictions of bodhisattvas and Buddhas from the past, present, and future. Another unpublished sculpture that I am showing you for the first time of Gautama Buddha, seated in Dhyana Mudra or in meditation, as the main iconography depicts on the base the Buddha performing Dhammachakra Mudra, flanked on either side by Maitreya holding the water flask and Avalokiteśvara holding the symbolic lotus flower. The iconography of this unpublished sculpture is an important landmark in the evolution of the attributes held by Avalokiteśvara from the garland to the lotus flower. The seated figures of Bodhisattva holding lotus or bouquet of lotus are depicted in various poses. Sometimes he is seated in the ordinary cross-legged pose. He is also shown with the legs crossed at the ankle, hanging off the stool which is he is seated, or with one foot hanging off the stool and posed on the footrest, with the other resting on the cushion or posed against or close to the opposite leg. In a well-codified context, the Bodhisattva image, whose turban crest bears a small image of a seated meditating Amitābha Buddha, is considered as Avalokiteśvara. It is well known that Avalokiteśvara, destined to attain Buddhahood, was commonly regarded as the emanation and thus the spiritual son of Amitābha Buddha. The identification and the dating of the standing statue of Bodhisattva from Saribalor, Mount C or D, now in the Peshawar Museum, holding a bouquet of flowers and characterized by a headdress with a small preaching Buddha, has caused much ink to flow. Fouché and Malman dated the statue not earlier than the 7th century on the grounds that the small Buddha in the headdress should be in the meditating attitude. Malman, refusing to consider the small preaching Buddha as Amitābha, goes as far as to identify him as Panchika and the object held in the hand as a purse or a bourse, one of the attributes of this deity, the Panchika. Harold Ingold, on stylistic grounds, identifies the sculpture as a depiction of Avalokiteśvara. The sculpture of Padmapani Avalokiteśvara that we have published in the exhibition catalogue, Dulamjisa Luxus, the Bodhisattva holds a similar lotus bouquet, and for this reason, considering the Bodhisattva from Saribalor as Padmapani Avalokiteśvara poses no problem for us. The sculpture of Bodhisattva in a pensive attitude, holding a lotus in the left hand, answers the objections raised by Fouché and Malman, because the small seated Buddha carved in the Jatamakuta is in a meditation pose, not in preaching attitude, so he has to be Amitābha, the spiritual father of Avalokiteśvara. It is now clear that the Bodhisattva depicted here is none other than Avalokiteśvara himself, because of the small Amitābha carved in the crest of the Jatamakuta. Furthermore, he is also Padmapani, one who holds the lotus flower, because the lotus flower he holds is the main attribute of Padmapani, one of the most common epithets of Avalokiteśvara, bodhisattva of infinite compassion. It is also important to discuss another objection one may make against this hypothesis on the basis of the Buddha triad from former Lord Tomato collection, currently on loan to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. The Buddha in the middle, seated on a lotus, making Dhammacakra Mudra, is flanked by two bodhisattvas. The bodhisattva standing to the right of the Blessed One is identifiable as Maitreya, thanks to the tied hair, even though his principal attribute, the water flask, is broken away, but still you can see a trace. The god with the same type of his hairstyle, standing behind the Buddha and Maitreya, is without doubt Brahma, reminding us of the both are Brahmins. As discussed earlier, it is taken for granted the bodhisattva wearing the Jatamakutta with a small Buddha in Dhyani Mudra or meditation post, carved in his crest is Avalokiteśvara. The god emerging from our right, behind the Buddha, is certainly Indra, as attested by the Vajra or the thunderbolt held in his left hand. However, going against this identification, the standing bodhisattva on the left side of the Buddha Shakyamuni was interpreted as Siddhartha himself by J. Ree because his left hand is posed on the west. It is normally taken for granted that this gesture of left hand posed on the west is of Siddhartha. It is true, for example, that the flask gable panel we have examined earlier, depicting three themes in three successive registers. The Bodhisattva Siddhartha stands frontally, making Abhay Mudra with his right hand, and the left kept akimbo on the west. In the middle register, the Buddha seated in Padmasana or lotus position on a pistil of a fully blown lotus displays Dhammacakra Mudra, the preaching gesture. The row of figures in the lower register, as we have seen, 7 Buddhas plus last in line, the Bodhisattva Maitreya, are depicted, thus visualizing the evolution from Bodhisattvahood to Buddhahood of Siddhartha and transition from Buddha Gautama to Bodhisattva Maitreya. The figure on the upper register is no doubt the Bodhisattva Siddhartha standing with his left hand kept against his left hip. First of all, one has to keep in mind that in Indian iconography, general assumptions are not to be considered as absolute truth. However, Francine Tissot claims that the left arm of the Bodhisattva in question was carved out, especially in recent years, and was fixed to its original location, indicated by the yellow color arrow. This means that at the origin, Bodhisattva was holding a wreath or a lotus in his left hand. If this observation is correct, the objection raised by Ree has no validity. The codified iconography traveled to China and to Maharashtra and beyond. The unfinished sculpture from cave number 24 of the Nasik, or the Pandavilan complex, depicts the seated Buddha performing Dhammacakra Mudra, flanked by Maitreya on our left, marked by a stupa in the Jatamakutta. Avalokiteśvara to our right, easily identifiable by the lotus flower he holds, and the Tathagata Amitābha in his headdress. A relief from Baoqingxi Temple in Xi'an, Shaanxi province in China, dating from the 703 of the Tang dynasty, shows a similar triadic composition, probably derived from Gandhāra. In this case, the Buddha in the middle can be Amitābha. An unpublished bronze sculpture depicting Avalokiteśvara seated on a lotus wearing a three-leaf diadem with a foliage motif tied with ribbons on the sides, the central leaf with seated Tathagata Amitābha in Dhyana Mudra, and two images of deified females, most probably white Tara and green Tara on either side, is so far unique in the Gandhāran region. This bronze sculpture is a part of a series of different iconographies that can be dated to the 6th and the 7th centuries. I would like to draw your attention to another unpublished bronze sculpture that was recently unearthed in northern Pakistan, which I could examine. The Buddha is seated on a simhasana, performing the Dharmachakra Mudra. The backplate attached to the pedestal of the main sculpture by a tenon and the back by a pin is shaped like a halo. The halo is decorated with twisted flames. To the weaver's right, Indra is standing, holding a thunderbolt in his left hand. To our left, Brahma is standing, holding a flask, Kundika, in his raised left hand. This sculpture and the one with the Taras are stylistically and technically identical and cannot be dated before the 6th century. Although bronze sculptures are rare, there seems to have been a resurgence of Buddhism marked by Mahāyāna tendencies revealed by rock-cut images of Avalokiteśvara and other bodhisattvas and Buddhas. Our Italian colleagues from the time of Kuṣāṇ and our Pakistani colleagues have done a great deal of work on tracing these reliefs, some of which are difficult to access. The map reproduced by our good friend Anna Filigensi show that they are widespread in Swat Valley. Before examining their iconography, allow me to show a few thought-provoking examples of these sculptures. Does the presence of so many Buddhist images carved into the rock contradict the decline of the Buddhism in Gandhāra conveyed by Chinese Buddhist monk Kuṣāṇ, who visited India in the 7th century? According to him, Buddhism was in decline in Gandhāra and Hinduism was on the rise. Taxila, once the cradle of Buddhist civilization, was in ruin and Buddhist monasteries were deserted. In contrast, Hindu temples were numerous and Hinduism popular. What are the reasons for this revival of the Mahāyāna iconographies in the Swat Valley then? First of all, contrary to what John Marshall led us to believe for several decades, assuming that the Hephthalites swept over the Gandhāra and Punjab, quote, carrying ruin and desolation wherever they went, quotation ends. Koyama has argued that, quote, the Hephthalites' destruction of Buddhism and Buddhist temples was a sheer conjecture, quotation ends. Furthermore, based on copper scroll inscription from the time of the Alkan Huns, Gudrun Meltzer argued, quote, although the long-held opinion of the Huns, cruelty and destruction of Buddhist monasteries lasts till today, our copper scroll that he published documenting the building of a stupa together with the Pura inscription documenting the erection of a monastery clearly show that under the rule of these Huns, Buddhist buildings were erected, quotation ends. Secondly, and principally, despite absence of the traces of Buddhist monasteries still in activity around the 7th century, traders of Buddhist confession seem to have been taking the land trade routes passing through Gandhāra. Among these trade routes, the one passing through Chitral, Swat, Gilgit, Punjab, using the passes of Karakoram, Hanging Pass, all the valleys of the distributaries of the Indus to reach Chinese Kashgar. Although scholars are not unanimous on the identification of Uddiyana with present-day Swat, Gusipatucci in 58 and 77 has argued that 8th century Tibetan and Chinese sources attest to the strategic importance of Uddiyana for the control of routes linking Central Asia and Northern India. It is in this context we can understand the importance of the unpublished bronze sculpture depicting Avalokiteśvara with the white and green taras on either side. I am very grateful to my good friend Yeshi Kempo for proposing this identification. It is an important addition to the rare presence of female deities in a region where sculptures are dominated by a male pantheon. As Anna Filigensi predicted in 2015, distinct iconographic types of Buddhist goddesses certainly existed in Swat at this time. Here is a proof. Moreover, Nimalsi Singha argues that Swat, Uddiyana, is considered one of the possible homelands of Tara. The composition of Avalokiteśvara with the white and green taras was very popular in Maharashtra cave temples, where Avalokiteśvara's reputation as the savior of traders enjoyed great popularity. The Buddhist caves at Ellora, generally dated to either 630 to 700 or 600 to 730 CE, feature several depictions of Avalokiteśvara accompanied by green and white taras on either side. The sculptures in cave number 11 and cave number 12 are exceptionally striking. To justify the popularity of Avalokiteśvara Padmapani in the Swat region, Gusipatucci argued it could be due to the bodhisattva's role as patron saint of the region, which would have earned him the special veneration of the local population. Avalokiteśvara Padmapani is usually depicted seated in a pensive pose, a posture in which the figure is shown half-seated with one bent leg while the other hangs in an angle. One cannot deny the fact that the majority of the rock-cut images of Avalokiteśvara Padmapani Swat Valley closely resemble the known bronze images of the same bodhisattva. One of the closest examples is also found in northern Pakistan, now in a private collection of Padmapani Avalokiteśvara is seated frontally with the bare left foot resting on the pistil of a lotus with downward turned petals. The right leg is drawn up and the foot is posed on the seat. Bodhisattva is seated on the stool with the lattice work. He is seated on two cushions posed on the dais. The Bodhisattva holds from his left hand a stem of a lotus, blossoming a little above the shoulder. The other hand is broken, but it may have been held close to the head in a pensive attitude. Likewise, his head inclines slightly towards the missing hand to his right. He wears a collar necklace made up of loop-in-loop chain adorned by a pendant composed of 5 petals fixed to the chain by a clasp. The grooved earlobes carry long earrings. Long braided locks of his hair fall over the shoulders. He wears a 3-leaf diadem with a foliate design, tied with ribbons at the sides, the central leaf with the seated Tathagata Amitābha in Dhani Mudra. The halo and mandorla are decorated with twisted flames. The bronze sculpture carries an inscription which runs around the upper part of the pedestal, and it was read by and translated and read by Oscar von Neumann. So Devadharmo Yam, Sakya Bhikshu, Vimala Bhanusya. So this is the pious gift of the Sakya Bhikshu, Vimala Bhanu. In a personal note, Oscar von Linneberg informed us that the shape of the letters points to a date around perhaps 500 to 600 CE. Perhaps the best known example was the one which was exhibited in the Berkeley Art Museum in 2021. Avalokiteśvara Padmapani is seated frontally with the bare left foot resting on the footrest, extending from the lower edge of the seat. The right leg is drawn up with the foot on the seat. The bodhisattva is seated on a cushioned dais decorated with lattice work, composed of flowers, leaves, and roundels. The bodhisattva holds in his left hand the stem of a lotus blossoming a little above the shoulder. The other hand is held close to the shoulder in a pensive attitude. Likewise, his head inclines slightly towards his right. His chest is bare. The undergarment is worn with a cord around the waist. He wears a short necklace made of beads arranged in decreasing sizes. He also wears bracelets and armlets. Amitābha Buddha, seated in the meditation, is visible on the sumptuous headgear worn by Avalokiteshvara. It is no exaggeration to say that, with a few exceptions, most of the images of Avalokiteshvara of this period, whether in bronze or carved in the rock, are characterized by the same iconography. However, the bronze sculpture preserved in a private collection that we exhibited, that we have just discussed, or discussed, originally had a black backplate attached to the pedestal of the main sculpture, probably by a tenant. This appears to have been lost. What is interesting here is that Avalokiteshvara is accompanied by two other bodhisattvas, giving a triad composition. To conclude my talk today, I would like to draw your attention to a group of Mahāyāna images, also from the Swat Valley, that are worth considering in this context. Like the previous sculptures of Padmapani Avalokiteshvara, this group is also found in the rock of the Khaṇ near the town of Swat. These sculptures were found buried underground and has suffered from erosion. There are three groups in all. The one on our far right, depicted standing facing up, holding a flask, could represent Bodhisattva Maitreya, or more likely, God Brahma. The second group in the center consists of the seated Buddha in meditation and two Bodhisattvas on either side. The one on our right, standing and holding a lotus, is probably Avalokiteshvara. The one on our left, holding what looks like a flask, is Maitreya. The third group on our left is probably Avalokiteshvara, with two Dharas, each on his side. Avalokiteshvara Padmapani is shown seated in pensive mood, holding the stem of a symbolic lotus flower on his left shoulder. Each Dhara holds a lotus flower. It is clear that Avalokiteshvara's reputation as savior of traders enjoyed great popularity in Gandhāra. The spread of the cult of Avalokiteshvara is therefore closely linked to the prosperity of, popularity of Mahāyāna cults in Gandhāra, and also to flourishing overland trade. Once Hinduism, due to royal patronage, took over from Buddhism, and the very nature of the trade routes changed as navigators found ways to trade directly with Far Eastern producers, cutting out the middlemen merchants who had crossed the various parts of Central Asia. The popularity of Mahāyāna cults declined in Gandhāra, but remained widespread in South and Southeast Asia and beyond for many centuries to come. I thank you very much for your attention.